Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This lecture is about the study of poetry, the essay by Mathew Arnold. This essay, the study of poetry, was first published in 1880. T.H. Watt, who was Mathew Arnold's relative, he wrote a book, The English Poets. This book was in 4 volumes, and in this book, we had the selection of poets from Chaucer to Rossetti. So a great number of poets had been discussed in the English poets. This essay, the study of poetry, was first published as an introduction to the English poets. This book, The English Poets, had an introduction, and as an introduction, this essay was given. So it was first published as an introduction to the English poets in 1880. Later on, it was published in another book by Mathew Arnold. The name of the book was Essays and Criticism, second series, and it was later published in this book. This essay has two parts, two major parts. In the first part is the discussion of the nature of poetry, the function of poetry, and what is the significance of poetry. These are discussed in the first part. It's quite theoretically done. In the next part, the second part, there is a survey of the English poets. And in these two parts, especially in the first one, he gives us his manifesto of critical creeds. So we find the critical beliefs of Arnold in this essay as far as poetry is concerned. A very important essay, the study of poetry. ये जो essay है, the study of poetry, यानी पोइट्री की स्टडी, जो कि मैथ्यू आर्नल्ड ने लिखा है, पहली मरतबा ये पब्लिश हुआ था 1880. ये विक्टोरियन एज 19th सेंचुरी की हम बात कर रहे हैं, और इसको शाया किया T.H. वाट ने, जो कि मैथ्यू आर्नल्ड का रिश्तेदार था. इसने ये किताब लिखी इंग्लिश पोइट्स, और इसमें जो कि 4 वॉल्यूम्स में था, इसमें चासर से रोसेटी तक पोइट्स के नाम है कि तमाम पोइट्स की कलेक्शन या सिलेक्शन, जिसको आप कह सकते हैं, इनकी पोइट्री की सिलेक्शन थी. इस किताब के इंट्रोडक्शन के तौर पे, किताब का इंट्रोडक्शन होता है, प्रेफेस होता है, इसने इंट्रोडक्शन के तौर पे इसी ऐसे को शाये किया था कि पोइट्री क्या है, पोइट्री का फंक्शन क्या है वगैरह. दूसरी मरतबा ये पब्लिश हुआ एसेज इन क्रिटिसिज्म सेकंड सीरीज़, मैथ्यू आर्नल्ड की किताब है. इसमें एक तो ये भी शायद था, और इसके अलावा भी फंक्शन ऑफ क्रिटिसिज्म हम पढ़ेंगे तो वो भी शामिल था, और भी बहुत सारे इसके एसेज थे. इस ऐसे के 2 मेजर पार्ट्स हैं, अच्छा खासा लंबा ऐसे है. पहला जो पार्ट है, इसमें नेचर ऑफ पोइट्री, कि पोइट्री क्या है, फंक्शन ऑफ पोइट्री, पोइट्री का काम क्या है, और सिग्निफिकेंस ऑफ पोइट्री, पोइट्री की अहमियत क्या है, ये किस दर्जे की चीज़ है, इसका जिक्र है पहले पार्ट में. दूसरे पार्ट में जो इंग्लिश पोइट्स हैं, चासर से लेकर बर्न्स तक, इन पोइट्स की सर्वे है, कौन सा पोइट इसके ख्याल में बेहतर है और कौन सा पोइट इसके ख्याल में बेहतर नहीं है. तो कहा यह जाता है कि ये जो ऐसे है, ये आर्नल्ड की जितने भी तनकीदी बिलीफ्स थे, क्रिटिकल बिलीफ्स, क्रिटिकल क्रीड्स, जितने भी प्रिंसिपल्स थे इसके जहन में, ये उन प्रिंसिपल को ज़ाहिर करता है. तो इसके जो क्रिटिकल प्रिंसिपल्स हैं वो इसमें मौजूद हैं. दूसरे एसेज में भी हैं, लेकिन ये ऐसे अच्छा खासा मशहूर ऐसे है. So this was just an introduction of this essay, that the essay has got 2 parts. The essay itself starts from here. And in the first few paragraphs, he talks about the future of poetry. And he says that the future of poetry is immense. It's very great. Poetry is not something trivial, and therefore its future is also very great. And that this poetry will prove itself better than religion, dogma, and tradition. This is what we are going to discuss in the next few paragraphs. So he tells us that the future of poetry is immense. It is very great. And the purpose of the religion was that it should have given something to us to stick to. That was the purpose of religion. The purpose of religion was that we should have something to stick to, and we should have something to stay with. That was the function of religion, but the religion was not performing this function in Victorian age, and therefore poetry would prove something um, for this race, for the human being, to which in which we will find something to stay and something to stick to. This function, which is that of religion, will be performed by poetry. We know that this Victorian age, the age in which Mathew Arnold lived, in this age, every creed, every belief was shaken. It was not only the religion or the religious beliefs, but also the tradition. Everything was losing its control in this age, in Victorian age in which Mathew Arnold lived. The dogma had become questionable. People started asking questions about the dogma, the religious beliefs. So they were not believing in religion anymore, in beliefs anymore. The tradition also had started to dissolve, and it was threatened, and people were leaving their tradition as well. The religion was also, it was losing its grip on the people because it had materialized, and it was rationality and reason with the help of which it was explained, and this could not be done. It could not be explained with the help of reason or rationality. So therefore it was losing its control on the people, and the people were no more believing in religion or tradition or dogma. So everything was losing its grip. He thinks, Matthew Arnold, that the future of poetry is immense in this regard, that it will replace all these things. It will replace dogma, it will replace tradition, it will replace religion, because the best thing for poetry is the idea. Idea is something which is the most important thing, as we have studied in Plato as well, that idea is the best of everything, and whatever we find in this world is the copy of the idea. He says the same thing, that idea is everything for poetry, in which the ideas are discussed in poetry. Poetry is not something about the particular things, it is not about the typical things, it is about the universal things. So it is the universality which is there in poetry, and as a result, the it is this poetry which will replace religion, tradition, as well as dogma. He also believed that even in the religion Christianity, the strongest part was its poetry. It is called unconscious poetry because if you study Bible, there are many songs in Bible, and the style is also poetical. So therefore, this reference is to the style of Bible. It is unconscious poetry, and it is that best part of poetry which is important. So therefore, poetry will replace all these things, the dogma, tradition, religion. Arnold gives an extreme type of importance to poetry, and he tells us that the future of mankind will find consolation and spiritual strength in poetry. This is a great tribute given by Mathew Arnold to poetry, that he thinks that human beings will find consolation in reading poetry. They will find spiritual strength when they read poetry. This is what he thinks. Um, he also tells us, and this is a quotation from him, that more and more mankind will discover that we have to turn to poetry to interpret life for us. The interpretation of life, if it is morality, must have been done by religion. But the religion was not doing it in 19th century Victorian age, and therefore we will have to, according to him, turn to poetry to interpret life for us. So the interpretation of how to lead a moral life or a good life, this is something which will be done by poetry. Secondly, it will console us. The consolation again is also given mostly by religion, so that function will also be taken over by poetry, and poetry will console us, and it will also sustain us. It will keep us alive. It will be a kind of food for us, this poetry. So he gives a very great importance to poetry. He believes that religion and philosophy, both of them, they will be replaced by poetry because religion has become quite material. It is now explained by rationality and reason, and this could not be done. Philosophy also has its drawbacks. Philosophy is too abstract, difficult to understand. So poetry will then replace these two. About science, he tells us that it is incomplete without poetry, and he quotes Wordsworth. Wordsworth, in his preface to Lyrical Ballads, has already said that poetry is the impassioned expression which is in the countenance of all science. Impassioned means emotional, countenance means face. The face of science is unemotional because science is written in a very factual language, and this robotic language in which science is used, which is emotionless, poetry will put an expression in this countenance, in this face of science, which is emotionless. So emotion will be given by poetry to science, because science cannot do that. Science refers to the facts in factual language, which becomes robotic language, having no passions in it, and therefore the countenance or the face, it becomes passionless. There's another quotation from Wordsworth from Preface to Lyrical Ballads, that poetry is the breath and finer spirit of all knowledge. By this he means that poetry is the best of all knowledges. Poetry is the soul and spirit of all the knowledges. It is the center of all the knowledges, because history is something which discusses only examples. It is better than history. It is better than philosophy because philosophy discusses only precepts. Only advice is given in philosophy. Poetry combines these two. It gives us precepts, that is, advices, and it also gives us examples. So it is easy to understand, and it combines the two. A religion, as far as religion is concerned, it relies too much on the concrete element. As we discussed earlier, religion tries to explain itself with rationality. People are trying to explain it with rationality and reason, and this was failing it because it could not be explained with the help of reason. Garrett, the critic, therefore says that Arnold's religion was poetry. He considered poetry as his religion because he says that poetry will replace religion. The reason was, as we have discussed, that the Victorian age was the age where the accepted creeds, the accepted dogmas, the beliefs were collapsing. The people were no more believing in religion or in dogmas, and whatever that is spiritual will be found in poetry. And he gave great importance to moral truth, to morality. So this is what he says. ये अभी जो हमने पढ़ा यहाँ से ऐसे शुरू होता है, और ये नेचर ऑफ पोइट्री और फंक्शन ऑफ पोइट्री का इसमें जिक्र है। उसके मुताबिक पोइट्री जो है ये एक अजीम चीज़ है, इसका फीचर भी ज़बरदस्त है, क्योंकि हमें पता है विक्टोरियन एज में जिसमें मैथ्यू आर्नल्ड रहता था, इस एज में रिलीजन की हालत ख़राब हो गई थी और लोग रिलीजियस बिलीफ्स डॉगमा पर यकीन करना छोड़ गए थे, ट्रेडिशन को भी छोड़ रहे थे और रिलीजन को भी छोड़ रहे थे, और रिलीजन को एक्सप्लेन करते थे एक्सक्यूज मी रैशनैलिटी के थ्रू, दिमाग के थ्रू, और ये वो कर नहीं सकते थे। लिहाजा इन सारी चीज़ों की का फ्यूचर नहीं था। पोइट्री जो है इसका ताल्लुक आइडिया के साथ है, जैसे कि हमने प्लेटो में भी पढ़ा है, और ये आफाकी यूनिवर्सल चीज़ों को डिस्कस करता है, पर्टिकुलर चीज़ों को डिस्कस नहीं करता, या मोस्टली यूनिवर्सल चीज़ों को डिस्कस करता है। रिलीजन में भी एक पार्ट जो स्ट्रांगेस्ट पार्ट है वो पोइट्री है, अगर वो अनकॉन्शियस है। बाइबल आप पढ़ें तो इसका स्टाइल पोइटिक है, और बाइबल में लिंग्विस्टिकली ये पोइटिक स्टाइल में लिखा गया है, तो ये भी कोई किस्म की पोइट्री है। इसका ख्याल ये है कि फ्यूचर में जो बनीनो इंसान है इसको अगर दलासा मिलेगा, कंसोलेशन मिलेगी या रूहानी स्ट्रेंथ मिलेगा, तो वो पोइट्री ही की मदद से मिलेगा, न कि रिलीजन की मदद से या डॉगमा की वजह से। और जितना वक्त गुजरेगा तो मैनकाइंड जो है वो पोइट्री की तरफ मुड़ेंगे कि पोइट्री उनके लिए ज़िंदगी को इंटरप्रेट करे, ज़िंदगी की वजाहत करे, कैसे गुजारें, और लोगों को कंसोल करें, दलासा दें, और लोगों को सस्टेन करें, बरकरार रखें और उनको ज़िंदा रखें। ये काम पोइट्री करेगा। रिलीजन और फिलॉसफी जो है ये दोनों रिप्लेस हो जाएंगे पोइट्री पे, क्योंकि रिलीजन जो है मटीरियलिस्टिक हो गया है, फिलॉसफी की यार किसी को समझ नहीं आती। साइंस का जहाँ तक ताल्लुक है तो वो वर्ड्सवर्थ को कोट करता है प्रेफेस टू लिरिकल बैलेट से कि पोइट्री जो है वर्ड्सवर्थ के मुताबिक ये इजहार है, इम्पेशेंट का मतलब है जज्बात से भरपूर, काउंटेनेंस कहते हैं चेहरे को। साइंस के चेहरे पर साइंस के चेहरे में जज्बात नहीं है, क्योंकि साइंस सिर्फ फैक्ट्स का जिक्र करता है, इमोशन का नहीं करता। ये जो साइंस का चेहरा है इसको जज्बात पोइट्री देगा। साइंस जो कुछ भी कहता है साइंटिस्ट, उसमें जज्बात नहीं होते, रोबोटिक लैंग्वेज होता है, तो ये इसको बेहतर बनाएगा। दूसरी कोटेशन भी इसी से है, वर्ड्सवर्थ से और प्रेफेस टू लिरिकल बैलेट से ली गई है। ये पोइट्री जो है ये ब्रेथ एंड फाइनर स्पिरिट है तमाम नॉलेज, यानी ये हर किस्म की नॉलेज का मरकज़ है। ये सर फिलिप सिडनी में भी हम पढ़ चुके हैं कि पोइट्री जो है तमाम नॉलेज इससे बेहतर है, तारीख़ से भी बेहतर है, क्योंकि तारीख़ में सिर्फ एग्जाम्पल होते हैं। फ़िलासफ़ी से भी बेहतर है, उसमें सिर्फ नसीहतें होती हैं, और ये दोनों चीज़ों को कंबाइन करता है, तो ये बेहतर है। रिलीजन का हमने पहले ही बता दिया कि इसका इन्हिसार ये कंक्रीट एलिमेंट पर है, रीज़न पर है, और यानी उस ज़माने में कोशिश करते थे कि रीज़न पे एक्सप्लेन हो, ये कर नहीं सकते थे, लिहाजा रिलीजन भी अपनी गिरफ्त खो रहा है। लिहाजा प्रोफेसर गैरेट बताता है कि आर्नल्ड का रिलीजन ही पोइट्री है, क्योंकि विक्टोरियन एज में जो عقائد تھے وہ تو غرق ہو گئے تھے، لہٰذا پوئٹری اس کو ریپلیس کرے گی. جتنی چیزیں اسپریچول ہے وہ پوئٹری میں ملیں گی. تو پوئٹری انتہائی امپورٹنٹ ہے. یہ ابھی تک چونکہ یہ ایسے لمبا ہے اور اس پہ ایک لیکچر 2 لیکچر میں نہیں ہوگا، چند لیکچر اس پہ گزریں گے. تو میرا خیال ہے کہ یہ اتنا فی الحال کے لیے کافی ہے. تھینک یو اینڈ گڈ لک.